You have gathered all of your information together and you have an outline, and now you need to sit down and actually write your paper and take those sources and put them into your own writing. So I'm going to be talking to you about 4 different ways that you can incorporate other sources into your own writing. The first one that we're going to talk about is an original quotation, and that's when you take a full section and put it into your own paper. It can be a sentence, it can be a couple sentences. The problem with this is it can make your writing sound stilted, and it can eliminate your own voice. And your own voice is extremely important when you're writing a paper. So you should try and avoid the use of original quotations. Don't have very many of them if you do have them at all. However, if you do select to use them, make sure you cite them and use quotation marks around the borrowed words. So here is a sample right here. You can see there are quotation marks around all the words that are taken from the other source. There are parentheses with the author's last name and the page number, and the period has been moved to the outside of the parentheses. Now, if your original work does not have a page number, you would just include the author's last name. If it doesn't have an author, then you would just include the title of the work. All of that information can be found on OWL, which I will show you later in this recording. Another option is a partial quotation. We worked a lot with partial quotations last try, and this is when you put part of it in your own words and part of it in someone else's words, the borrowed words that you're taking. If you do this, make sure that you include the citation at the end of the sentence and that you put quotation marks around any words that are not your own. So, here is the original quotation that we saw before. What you should do right now is pause the slideshow and create your own partial quotation in your notes. Now that you've created your own partial quotation, I'll show you my sample right here. Analysis is to, quote, think about how a whole can be broken into its smaller parts. It is used when people narrow a broad general subject into a topic more specific. Note that the parentheses have been moved to the end of the sentence. Even though the quotation ends at subject, you don't put the citation in until right before the period. I also want to call your attention to the brackets around the word people. Now, if you look at the original quotation, it says when you narrow. And I wanted to eliminate this because the rest of my voice wasn't using a you voice. So I changed the word you to people. That's what a bracket means. You've changed it. Now you need to be careful that you don't change the meaning when you do this. You and people, that means the same thing. You could also use it when you're changing a tense. If you're writing about some historical event that's happened in the past and you have this and it was in the present when they wrote it, you need to add the ed and you can use the brackets around that as well. So that's a partial quotation. Another thing that you can do is paraphrase, and that's when you put something in your own words. And you may have heard that you don't need to cite it. However, that is not the case. You do need to put the in-text citation in still. You, however, do not need to use quotation marks because it's your own words. Here we have the same quotation. Pause the slideshow now, and in your own notes, write your own paraphrase. Now that you've created your own paraphrase, here's a sample. Analysis is breaking something down into smaller sections. It is used to limit a topic and make it more specific. Note the sentences are basically the same, but I put them in my own words. It's still cited. The final thing that you can do is a summary, and that's if you have, for example, a whole article and it told a story, but you don't want to include the whole thing. You just want to summarize what that article said in a couple sentences. And so what you need to do is you need to make sure you include the citation and not use the quotation marks. So here, what you should do right now is pause the slideshow and create your own summary at this point. Now that you've created your own summary, here's a sample. Analysis means to break a complicated concept down into smaller, easier to grasp parts. You can see it's much shorter, much more brief. A few other research items to remember is that anything you cite needs to be on your works cited page. So if you have anything in text, it should also be on that last page, otherwise it is plagiarism. The same is true that if you have something on your works cited page, it has to be in text cited as well. It's not a works reference page, it's a works cited page. Also, if you're going to quote secondary sources, this means that you have a source that quotes someone else. So you have this article by Smith, but within it, Smith is quoting Johnson. So how do you do that? Well, you'd say Johnson argued that, and in the parentheses, you would put as cited in Smith, because Smith is what you're going to find on that works cited page. Also note that the thesis has to be in your own words. It should be your own question. And almost everything else should be on that works cited page. Note that this isn't your background knowledge paper. This is a paper where you're gathering resources and putting them together. So almost every detail that you mention should have in-text citation. This goes through the steps of the introduction. Make sure you're including an attention getter and giving the background. Also end your introduction with your thesis or research question. As far as your conclusion goes, it's pretty open based on the style of paper that you selected to write. There are some options that are listed that you can pause and read through. However, there are other options as well. These are just a few choices that you could possibly. Before I wrap up, I just want to show you, don't forget about owlenglishpurdue.edu, and if you go to the MLA 2009 Style and Formatting Guide, you're going to find so much information, more information than you would ever need. And you can look up information on in-text citation or how things look on a works cited page as well. Say you're looking for, how do I in-text cite something if I have something with, I have two works by the same author. Oh, look, there it is right there. It explains to you exactly how to do it. So make use of the owl.english.purdue.edu. You can also, of course, ask your teacher if you have any questions. Don't forget about the minimums. You need at least 5 sources for your paper to be graded. You need at least 2 sources per paragraph in your body in order for your paper to be graded. And you need to include at least 1 partial quotation, at least 1 paraphrase, and at least 1 summary. You will have many more of them, but you need to include at least 1 of each. If you have any questions further, please ask your teacher.